You can't handle the truth. Most of you who heard that line likely know exactly where I got it from. There's a movie, it's a classic, it's called A Few Good Men. And there's this particularly poignant scene in which the two main characters find themselves in a courtroom, the colonel, and then we also have the lieutenant. And they're going back and forth because there was an issue, there was a hazing ritual that had gone bad. And they were trying to figure out what had happened and who was at fault. And the colonel's line pierced through all of it. You can't handle the truth. Was it that the lieutenant couldn't handle the truth? Not exactly. The problem in that particular exchange was that the colonel had his own version of truth, that he was living according to his own moral code. He knew that everyone walking the face of the earth, they had the natural law and they had all sorts of other laws to follow. And yet he thought himself exempt because of his office, because of his place. He thought he had plenty of excuses. And the movie continued on. And we may not necessarily use that line ourselves in our day-to-day, but it is something for us to consider. Have we ever been in the colonel's place where we were trying to invent our own truth about what was right, about what was wrong, and about what God's will was for each of us? And the readings actually help to highlight how we can discover what it is. So the first reading, we started off with the prophet Isaiah. So this is a warning to Shebna that there is Eliakim who is coming to take his place. Shebna, as a ruler, he was a very proud, very arrogant, very boastful ruler. And the Lord was telling him in this passage, his time had come to an end. And Eliakim was going to be the one to take his place. And Eliakim was going to take that office so that he stood in the place of the Lord, that he would be able to fix a peg and it would stay, that he would be able to open something, it would stay open, no one else would be able to shut it. So we're told that the Lord is giving him this place of importance to help to guide his people and to keep them safe. And so this office is important. An office will come up again in just a moment. The second reading comes to us from St. Paul's letter to the Romans. And at the beginning, he extols the wisdom and the knowledge of God because they are far beyond our imagination, that we cannot begin to comprehend the plan and everything that God knows. And that's why he asks this series of rhetorical questions. Who can know the mind of God? Who's been his counselor? Who has given something to God so that he may be repaid? The answer is no one, because the Lord owns everything. He's all-knowing, all-powerful. He is able to discern everything from the beginning of time to the end. And that's why St. Paul gives us that question and these series of questions so that we can understand and we can recollect that the Lord has got it all well in hand. And even his own plan for our life is to be trusted because he's far wiser than we. Then we move on to the gospel according to Matthew. And Jesus, as they're traveling about, he asked the disciples two questions. He asked, who do people say that I am? And then he asked, who do you say that I am? The first one was easy to answer. Who do people say that I am? They could report on the latest gossip, all the rumors that they had heard. Well, some say Jeremiah, some say John the Baptist, some say Elisha, some say some of the other prophets. And then Jesus asks the more pointed question and the more personal one. But who do you say that I am? And it's Peter that has the right answer. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus, he takes this moment to show Peter what his position will be from then to the time of his death, that he would be the first pope, the pontiff. He was going to be the rock. He was going to be the one that was going to direct the life of the church as long as the Lord desired. You are Peter, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you. My God has, my Father. So I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. The gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. That he would hold the keys to the kingdom of God. So what does all of this mean? All of this means Jesus is giving him authority over his church. that he is saying that the decisions that Peter has to make, they may not be perfect. He may not get everything right, but his office is to be respected, that he will shepherd and he will lead Christ's church that he leaves to all of his people. And indeed, we see that still today through Pope Leo XIV, that he still sits in that same position, and all bishops and priests in union with him are charged with guiding and governing the church. They have authority. But authority in our day and age, it's a dirty word. We don't like authority. We don't like anyone else being in control or in charge. And that's where our modern problem really is. Because as we look at this gospel and as we look at the first reading, we may not conceive of a problem quite readily, but we start to, whenever we start to apply the different teachings of not just the Gospels, not just the entirety of Scripture, but the church, that everything she says, it goes. It applies to our lives. No excuses and no sort of way to explain ourselves out. That we are all bound by that law. But the modern problem is that we start to invent Christianity or Catholicism to be what we make it. That we feel like, if this makes sense to me, I'll follow it. But if that doesn't, then I won't. And that's not what Jesus is saying in this gospel. What Jesus is saying is he's pointing at Peter and he's essentially saying, listen to him. Because he's your ticket to the kingdom of heaven. And that's important because that echoes all the way down through hundreds of popes to today. That what they say matters. But what does that look like in reality? Or in our modern problem where we find ourselves kind of making up what we feel like morality is. Or maybe picking and choosing what teachings of the church are convenient and those that aren't. Because faith isn't proved when we agree with everything the church is saying. It's especially proved when we may not understand. So let's put wheels on this and let's take it out for a spin. So what does this look like, this modern problem? Well, we know the church says you have to be in church on Sunday, that you have to go to Mass, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. But there is an excuse out there, or at least some have made one, that they say, well, if I'm busy, or if I've got something better to do, if I've got a better offer, if there's a sports tournament out here, I don't have to go to church. The church never said that. The church instead says that if you miss church on a Sunday, that's a grave sin, run to confession. And it's not because the church is being mean. It's not because the church is just trying to lord over us. It's the church pointing at us and saying, if you excuse yourself from Sunday Mass without good reason, being illness, something's gone wrong and something needs to be addressed. And that's why it says it's a grave matter, not just a small sin, it's a big one, so that we understand the magnitude of what we deal with. Or sometimes we might even tell ourselves, well, I don't need to go to confession, I'm not doing anything that serious. Besides, it makes me a little uncomfortable. That's the point. It's meant to be uncomfortable, and not in a way that it scares us away, but it's meant to be uncomfortable because we're doing wrong, that we are admitting that we have things we should be ashamed of, and that we need to offer to the Lord for forgiveness. That it's not there to be large and scary and cumbersome. It's there to set us free. It might be uncomfortable to unladen ourselves from all of the sins or the things that we've done, but we should. Because that's why the confessional is there, whether great or small. The confessional is not there for the person in the pew across the church. It's there for you, and it's there for me. Or whenever it comes to all of the morality, say that we pick on sexual ethics for a moment, that our human sexuality, it's a great gift, but if it's used outside the context of what the Lord has given to us, then we've got a problem, and we start hurting ourselves. And we have to admit that because the wisdom of God is far greater than ours. And if He says, don't do this, we should not do it. There is no excuse, there is no reason for us to do whatever we're doing, whether with ourselves or with someone else. In its right context, it's a great good. But if it's not, then we need to stay away because great harm can befall us. And it's not just that, but if we look all over what the church teaches us, if we look at all areas of morality, whether it's expressing forgiveness to one another, whether we lie or tell the truth, whether it's where we find ourselves being charitable with some and not with others, whether we listen to the Lord's will in our life or we don't. That these are all areas where we have to discern and be aware. Where are we kind of pointing at God in the words of the colonel and saying, you can't handle the truth? Those are the areas where we excuse ourselves, where we tell ourselves, that sin, I don't agree with the church, I'm going to do it anyway. Or this area is a little inconvenient, so I'm going to ignore it. Jesus, whenever he gave the keys to Peter, he didn't say that he was just a way to the kingdom of heaven. He said he had the keys, that he was charged with getting everyone to the kingdom of heaven. And the church still does that today. But perhaps the point of examination for all of us is to consider, in my life today, where am I actually living according to the truth, according to God, according to what he has said to you and to me and what he has asked of us? Where are those places that we can give thanks to God for those? But also, where are the ways that we're like that colonel from A Few Good Men? We're kind of saying, I'm excused, that I can't handle, that in fact God can't handle what I'm doing, he can't understand. Where are those areas? And where is it time to maybe admit that we don't exactly know the truth ourselves, but it's time to surrender to the one who does? You see, it isn't just a colonel from a movie telling God, you can't handle the truth. It's actually God telling us that sometimes, that we need to take out our excuses. We need to put aside our own will, and we actually need to behold to the Lord, to his church, and to even Peter, who's trying to get us to the kingdom of heaven. My brothers and sisters, the Lord gives us the truth. He gives us his law. He gives us his church. Where can you and I follow the truth more closely this week?